I'm going to take a minute just to introduce Sig Libowitz, who is our, he is really the reason that we're here in this space, because without him this never would have happened. Although there's a whole team of people who made this possible, Sig was the person who kind of opened the way for us to make this happen. So Sig, who is standing here, might look familiar to you because he was a character on The Sopranos. He's an actor before he became a lawyer, I think, before he became a producer and all the other things I'm going to tell you about. But he was on Sopranos and House of Cards and Law and Order and just a number of really interesting projects he's done. Or you might have even seen him in his own film, which is called The Response, and it was nominated for an Academy Award. It's based on transcripts from Guantanamo Bay interrogations. It's a narrative film, it won actually the ABA Best Award for Drama and Literature. And thanks to that, he actually, ended up getting involved in going to Guantanamo Bay as a special legal observer. He is a producer, a writer, an actor, an attorney, and a former studio head of production. He also executive produced In the Bedroom, which was nominated for 5 Academy Awards. So he runs the film and media program here at Hopkins in the graduate division of Hopkins. And he's going to introduce Ian and Ben of the Outlaw Ocean Project.
Hi there, thank you. I had to pay Diana handsomely to say all that, and it was worth every penny. Just a couple quick corrections, though. That's 95% true. I didn't executive produce In the Bedroom, but I was the executive in charge of production and oversaw it for the studio. But it's a pleasure to be here, and welcome everyone to Johns Hopkins and to the Bloomberg Center, and particularly I want to make a welcome to the Double Exposure Film Festival and to Diana. It's such a pleasure to have this festival. It really stands out for the work that they do and the quality of the films and the filmmakers they bring. So thank you very much, Diana. You guys are in for a real treat. When Diana came to talk to me about the Outlaw Ocean Project and to moderate this, I have to be honest, I said, I'm not familiar. But I have since become familiar, and the more I learn, the more I want to learn. This is an incredible project that the people you're about to meet are up to. And so without any further ado, let me bring them up, and then we're gonna see some of the work that they're doing and have a conversation about how it all started and where they're going. I gotta put this on. Okay, so let me first bring up Ian Urbina, who directs the Outlaw Ocean Project, which is a nonprofit journalism organization. He's previously a New York Times staff reporter for 17 years, where he's received just a few awards, including a Pulitzer Prize, 2 George Polk Awards, and an Emmy. Ian, if you'd please join us. And joining Ian is Ben Blankenship, a filmmaker and a naturalist guide who transitioned from film and television production to photojournalism, documentary making, and writing. His work spans Central and South America, East Africa, and North America. And I can also say it, the Pacific and many other places now. He's been all over. His work has been published in National Geographic Explorer, the New York Times, the Oregonian, and Photographers Without Borders. If you'd please help me welcome Ben Blankenship. Okay, terrific. Oh, thank you. I even get one of these. Wonderful. So before we begin, and welcome, gentlemen, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
We're going to watch a little video, right, Ben? If you want to give them the heads up or tell them what they're going to see.
Sure. So this is an excerpt taken from our reporting on the China Distant Water Fishing Fleet, and we produced a piece that showed the behind the scenes and how the reporting was done. So without further ado, this will be video clip 1.
Starting. Got it? Just going all the way around the ship. You can get a 360.
Yeah.
Just don't go across.
Yeah. That's good.你们想要回去海还是不想？
当然不想，
为啥？为什么？
因为海赚来熬啊。
哎，我们想赶快把鱼钓完了就回到家了。
在这里也没有吃好东西，
对，
新
因
鲜
为我们在这么长时间全部吃的都是冻菜，
我们出海就
难得见到一次这么新鲜的菜。
여기 어저께 본 두 번째 배가 yeah, the boat next to this boat we saw yesterday.
And you work down here?
Yes.
Everyone works down here, or one guy?
Oh, me and the big man.
Big man. Any shark? You guys ever catch any shark?
Yeah.
Shark, yeah.
No shock. No shock.
G 一按98，你听我吗？
对，我98。你们这里来什么目的啊？
那在我们看在新闻，你们也有像警察，这是真的是假的？你可以让我们了解，你们在这里是保护人家，还是是保护，所以你们就做什么？
And just to give you a sense, that only really begins to tell the story. You know, as I was watching it, like, you find out how long these people are kept on the ships for over a year, right, without ever getting off the boat. They're tricked into what they have to do, correct? And their passports are taken?
Yeah. Is this on?
It's
Yeah.
on?
So this is the distant water fishing fleet. So that's the ship. These are the ships that stay on the high seas, and we were focused on the squid fleet in particular. Those are ships that stay especially long periods because they're going further distances, and some of them are at sea for 3 years straight. And a lot of the crew is indeed trafficked and bamboozled into taking these jobs.
Yeah, just to add to that, they're often told when they sign these contracts that they'll be returning to port in a number of months, only to board the ship and then be told that they won't be seeing land again for another 2 to 3 years.
And they are fishing for the fish that then we here in America are eating?
Yeah, I mean, we chose the squid fleet because calamari is a universally consumed product that everyone can relate to, and most of it's coming from this fleet in particular.
Wow. So my question for you is, first of all, if I'm correct, this all started with you doing a piece for the New York Times, but then it's grown amazingly. So what's the origination of this and the inspiration?
Yeah, so at the Times I was on the investigative squad, and I did typically series that take a while. The Outlaw Ocean was such a series, and it ran for 2 years, a year and a half, about 15 pieces over the course of that period. Its conceit, its thought was to focus on the intersection of human rights and environmental concerns, quite especially on the watery 2/3 of the planet, and even more specifically on the high seas, the international waters of it. And also the goal in the original series, and still really, was to sort of broaden people's understanding of what's happening out there. You know, if I talked to the average person and said I'm working on crime at sea, the first thing they say would be, oh, so Somali piracy or the BP spill. These are sort of burnt into our minds through popular media for good reason. They're good stories, important stories, but we wanted to look at human slavery, arms trafficking, intentional dumping of oil, illegal whaling, illegal fishing. So repo men of the sea, abortion providing at sea, wild, unexpected things that are happening out there that otherwise don't get known. And then, so just to finish the story, the origin story, 2 years at the Times, produced that series, then left the Times for 2 years to go back out to sea to produce the book, and had a Brazilian videographer with me named Fabio Nascimento, a great documentary filmmaker. Came back to the Times after the book, stayed at the Times for 1 more year, and was sort of kind of changed by the whole 4 years of doing my own thing, and decided to leave the Times and make my own kind of ProPublica style nonprofit journalism shop, and was funded by originally by the Bloomberg Philanthropies to do just that, and so launched the Outlaw Ocean Project, and here we are 5 years later.
Amazing. And then I think something that really came out to me as I started investigating, seeing there's just lots of their work is, you can see it on YouTube, and it just one thing leads you to the next, and the story just goes deeper and deeper. But maybe you could explain, which I didn't know, this idea of the international ocean and how little of it is public, and you guys make some great points in some of the videos on that.
Sure. So a lot of the fleets that we're looking at fish in what is international waters. And the international waters are a unregulated land. Laws do apply to each ship, but they are rarely enforced. There is no enforcement system in place. So a lot of these captains operate with impunity. And so the experience of a crew member on any one of these ships varies greatly between which captain, which ship you have. And so what we're looking at is what Ian came up with was this outlaw ocean area, a lawless land where anything can happen, and where anything can happen, it often does. Yeah.
And I would just add sort of definitionally, if you think of, 2/3 of the planet is covered by water. Now think of if you're on land in a country 12 miles out or 200 miles out, depending on the kind of thing you want to do. If you're fishing or if you're wanting to drill for oil, there are different lines you're thinking about. But the national to international line will either be 12 or 200. Beyond 200, you're definitely in international waters. or the high seas. And in that zone, there are some laws, some agreements, these sorts of things. But the reality is there isn't a police force to enforce them. So there is no, the blue helmets of the UN don't do enforcement. Interpol is not an enforcement agency. So really those rules out there are only enforced if someone raises a stink about something having been violated. And that happens on land and rarely. And then the other issue kind of that makes this a extra legal, if not often illegal place, is that as a crime scene, there aren't skid marks, there often aren't bodies, there often aren't dependable witnesses. And then the jurisdictional issues on the vessels are super complicated. So imagine a ship as a factory. Now the factory is in outer space. And the people in the factory, it's owned by one guy from one country. The captain and the officers are from another country. The ship is flagged to a third country, and the crew are from a fourth country. And that fourth country where the crew are from are mostly poor, undocumented Global South folk. So they're not well represented, they're often illiterate, they don't speak the language of the officers. Roll that all up and put it out on the water, that's why you have the Outlaw Ocean.
And am I right? So little of these international waters are patrolled. I think you write it's only 20% that anyone...
Well, none of them are patrolled in the sense that, so historically, a century ago, the sort of powerful nations had pretty robust navies, and they did some amount of patrols, but mostly to protect their own flagged vessels as they're traversing. Navies has been shrunk the world over, and their mission has largely been sort of decidedly moved away from law enforcement and more towards geopolitical kind of muscle flexing. And so there are no police, there are armies, there's a military, it's a very different thing out there. And so patrolling of any sort on the high seas is non-existent, except, oddly, by some NGOs that have sort of self-deputized, Sea Shepherd, Greenpeace, et cetera. The guy, that you saw on this vessel runs an organization. He's an ex-Sea Shepherd guy. He's got a vessel, and they go out and do sort of pseudo patrols, but they don't really have a badge. So they have to exert some sort of almost vigilante conservationist leverage using press and other means.
So and you guys are doing something no one else is doing.
In fairness, there are other reporters out
Right.
there. They're sparse, but yeah, in terms of journalism that's actually going out into the space consistently over long hauls, yes, we've cornered the market on that. But there are AP and The Guardian and Haiku and lots of places have individual stories in the New York Times that are amazing, usually one-offs, but not as a consistent investigative endeavor.
And since you started the organization, when was that? That was in?
2019, really took off in late 2019.
That's great. So what are your plans, to distribute this? And also, where do you see yourself as far as your goals?
Yeah, I mean, I loved the Times. It was a teaching hospital. It took me in. I didn't have a clue. I was an anthropologist before, not a journalist, and they taught me everything I know. So none of this is besmirching the Times, but I grew restless and wanting to do more daring experimental things, including in the realm of distribution. I thought there was amazing innovation going on in how stories are told, how you capture them, reporting tactics. But in the modes of distribution, they didn't seem to be more than the traditional, we have a restaurant, we want diners to come here kind of model. And I thought that was a dying notion. And so I sort of wanted out-service. And I also thought if you look at the global public as a pie, and you think of what are the big portions of the pie that are completely missed by the New Yorker or the New York Times or places like that, which I love and write for still, youth, non-English, Global South, big chunks of that pie just completely unaccessed. So I thought, okay, if I'm gonna run my own shop, how could I potentially get at those big demographics? And one is, sure, let's do a 10,000 word story for the New Yorker and make it incredibly strong as best as we can. But let's not stop there. Let's try new tactics of taking the same reporting and transforming it into other mediums so as to get those other audiences. And maybe even in different ways, not just sort of through the eyes reading words up to the head, but through the ears with music down to the heart, up to the head, different sort of tactics for accessing different people. And so a lot of what we do is standard investigative deep dive narrative stuff, that's written word and doc film in origin. But then we take another 6 months and have an international mural program, international music program, animation projects, and we think, how could we take the same material if we're willing to decidedly engage in slow journalism and slow everything down and figure out, could we get more impact? And then we also, the last thing I'll say is on the distribution front, if we're gonna have rich guys like Bloomberg fund us, and that thing took 4 years to produce and over $1 million, no venue is gonna pay that, even if you're looking at $2 a word at the New Yorker or something, you can't cover your costs. So why sell it? Why not go to the New Yorker, but 40 other venues in 10 languages and say, we're not gonna sell it to you, but we will give it to you and only you in your country and language for free, and you gotta abide by our embargo, so everyone gets to go at the same time. And then you get 10 times the readership in lots of different languages in different places. So that's the other thing we do now.
See, that's fascinating to me. I come from a world of film distribution, where again you would break up your film into territories. You'd sell the French rights, the Italian, South American rights. So the fact that you're doing that, it's really novel. How did you come up with that? I'm asking for the trade secret.
No, there's no secret. I just don't recall. It was sort of ad hoc. Well, the notion was initially, I can't recoup costs, and if I can get funders to believe in the journalism, then why even try? And then I thought, well, if I'm going to give it to free to someone, then I should have a little bit of power in setting some terms. And so why don't I say, I'm not playing by your rules on exclusivity. I'll play a little bit if it's the New Yorker or the New York Times, so I won't let the LA Times or the Atlantic, also run it. Okay, that's fine. But it's going to run in El País and Le Monde and El Global and every other places, and you got to be okay with that. And you also don't get any residuals, meaning you can't make a movie out of it. You don't own the IP, because if there's going to be a movie made out of it, I want the nonprofit to benefit, not you guys, frankly, affectionately.
I think that's brilliant. Again, also as an attorney, to have an understanding of your intellectual property rights is wonderful. I have to say, representing a lot of filmmakers, it separates you from most who don't have an understanding. And it's so important to know, the power, the exclusive rights you own. You glanced over it, Ian, and it's so important. The fact that you're thinking about it, if you could talk in more detail about this idea of you're branching out into murals and music, and particularly animation. Could you talk, both of you guys, in more detail about that, please?
Yeah, so we have ways of distributing our reporting that is inspired by the narrative investigative reporting. So we have an entire department that's focused around murals, and you can see murals that are inspired by the reporting throughout the world, in South America, North America, Asia, and these, especially like the squid piece, you can see that these artists read the story, they absorb the narrative, the plight of these people working on these ships, and they produce art inspired by it. And it's these amazing, gigantic murals that are visible, from hundreds of yards away, and it's truly inspiring. And then another side is the music project. And in the music project, we collaborate with musicians spanning a whole range of genre. We provide them often with music samples that are taken from the field, so it could be the sound of the squid jig machines running or deckhands singing on a ship as they're working, and they produce music that benefits the musician financially. It's available on Spotify, but it also helps disseminate the reporting. And then we convert a lot of our reporting into animation as well. We're actually in production right now on a feature that is animated, inspired by the book, The Outlaw Ocean, in which we have worked with composer Will Siegel, who has produced 8 rap music video in the style of Hamilton, commissioned 8 different animators who have taken it and done something with their own flair to it. They've interpreted it in their own way, and so we have 8 individual pieces in a completely different style that are going to be linked together into a single feature animated film.
And wrapped by the original Hamilton cast.
Correct. Yeah. Sorry, I forgot. Yeah, we got the Hamilton cast. Sorry.
Don't drop that detail, guys. Let me tell you. I want to help you market yourselves. That's important. That's so great that you're thinking about it outside the box. And that kind of what I think so many filmmakers, documentarians are looking for that. Again, I think people would just, how did this come about? How did you start thinking of that and putting that into motion?
I mean, again, I left the Times. I had been spoiled by a 2-year book leave where I was like, oh, this is what it feels like to not get the call and have to be on a plane 2 hours later on a breaking news story. I can assemble my own team, decide my own. So then when I left the Times and created this little family we have, I thought, what would be fun? What would fulfill me? And I love music. I sooner listen to music than I do watch TV. And I have no musical talent at all. And so I thought, what would be a neat way to try to get, in collaboration with musicians that I like. And so that was simply where the music idea came out. And I thought also, well, what if we found a way to get musicians to take the sound archive, give them the freedom they need, to sort of interpret it. We never unlock our footage because that runs into misery porn risk and stuff like that, So we handle the music video, and but the sounds and what music they make is entirely their decision. Then they hand it back, and we handle the distribution. Or this is historical. We've sort of paused on the music project. But the thought there that sort of emerged was, well, why can't Spotify be a news platform? And so why can't we get people that are not going to find us on New Yorker because they're not looking at the New Yorker or Le Monde or whatever, but they might find this, reggae artist they love, and she's just put out some new thing, and it says the Outlaw Ocean. She's like, why is this song showing me this? She gets curious, she clicks over, and there's off-ramp from Spotify or the 20 other music platforms to the website. So we sort of breadcrumb that. And mural is the same conceit. It came later, QR code on the mural.
Smart.
He uses a grand term, department. We're 9 of us. We're a tiny shop. There's one young woman who runs the whole mural project, and she recruits the muralists and says, look, you design what you want. Here's the specific project that's coming up. We've targeted you because you're in Uruguay, and it's going to be looking hard at Uruguay or Argentina or whatever, and we'd love to land a mural right when the story comes out so people are seeing it everywhere. But we need you to finish in this time frame. And then when they finish, they film their whole production process, hand it back to our team, Ben and Rafaela, and they make a video where they interview the muralist in their native language, blah, 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 blah. And it gives, some traffic to the muralist, but it also gives us traffic, again, of the demographics we're probably not going to otherwise access.
Yeah, because the people who are seeing these murals are often not the people who are reading The New Yorker. So they get exposure to this story through an entirely different avenue. And if it leads them back to the narrative story, then that's an amazing way to get there.
That's really great. Okay. I have many more questions on that, but I want to leave questions for the audience. But my next question is, again, obviously also coming at it, looking at it as a producer, I mean, how did you guys shoot this? I mean, the production values, and not only that, but you're shooting on open water, on the high seas.
Yeah.
What is the production, perspective on this? What's the planning, and how did you guys accomplish this?
Sure. So first off, I need to give kudos to an amazing team of videographers that we've worked with over the years. Ian mentioned Fabio Nascimento, who's from Brazil. Ed O, who was featured in this video, videographer, award-winning photojournalist, and Will Miller, who also worked with us on the Squid piece and some earlier pieces in Libya as well. And the talent that they bring to this is so important to the production value overall and the experience they have shooting in the field. That said, shooting in the field on the ocean is an entirely different animal to deal with. We typically go in overburdened with equipment, and shooting from small vessels, especially on the high seas when you're dealing with 8-foot swells and spray and all those things, it's really a shooting ratio issue. We shoot a lot, we keep recording, and it puts a big burden on the editing room as well. When we're looking at this footage, we'll end up with tens of terabytes of material, and we're going to try to pull together a 12-minute film from that. But really, it's persistence and kind of a grittiness that our videographers have when they come to each of these projects, and their passion for getting the best footage possible, despite really challenging circumstances.
I'm sure. And then obviously you guys are using drones a lot. What is
Yeah.
that experience? And again, particularly drones on the high seas.
Yeah, so flying a drone at sea is, I think you might think of it as liberating. There's not tree limbs or power lines or any of these things to run into, but the truth is everything below you is a hazard. And you have basically about a 6-foot by 8-foot square, which is a safe landing zone. There are certainly techniques that we use to launch drones at sea and landing them as well, but it's a huge part of our reporting. And the Mavic series drones have become so intuitive and great to fly that they've really opened up this entirely new point of view for our reporting as well.
How so?
Well, one of the stability on these drones is so good, and the ability to have live compass feeds. So we don't shoot with GPS out at sea. It often is undependable, but we shoot in what's called attitude mode, and it basically shows us a point on the map where the drone is and a point on the map where it took off from, and it's the drone pilot's job to keep up with these 2 points, because often we lose sight of the drone, and often we lose sight of the ship from the drone because we're shooting in foggy, cloudy conditions. So
And at night sometimes.
often at night as well, especially for the squid fleet, because the squid ships are pretty much only fishing at night because they use bright lights to bring the squid to the surface, and so a lot of that shooting was at night. Yeah.
And I saw there's a number of different types of drones, and you mentioned one of them in particular.
Yeah.
Ben, if you want to.
Oh yeah, our infrared setup.
Yeah.
So we've had the pleasure of working with some really great manufacturers as well. One of them is Teledyne FLIR, and they provided us with an amazing platform as well that shoots infrared 4K as well as shooting traditional RGB as well. And that allowed us at night to really get a good look at what's happening on the deck of these vessels. When shooting with traditional HD camera from these things, when you're looking down, all you see is this flood of white light because of the lights on these squid ships. So shooting with the infrared was a really great way to see through that light and see what's actually happening on the deck of the ship.
That's amazing. And Ian, for you, obviously coming from more of a reporting background, what has it been like for you now that you're opening up this documentary world and the drones and everything that Ben and your other videographers are doing?
I mean, look, at the Times and ever since, much of what I did in the final 10 years at the Times was foreign investigative, and I always learned the most from the photographers that were with me, from everything from the best kit just to spidey sense, knowing when it's time to get out of there, how to be quiet in the most broadly defined metaphoric way, and just be present, observing, but not attracting attention. So I just learned a lot from photographers always. So it's not new in that sense. They often would have better intel on where to go, et cetera. So I think that what I did realize, though, what I have learned post New York Times is just how, for better and for worse, becoming less word consumers and more image consumers as a global public, and unfortunately shorter form too, which I'm not thrilled with. But so the kind of content that we need to bundle up has to be doubly robust in the visual space and have lots of different sizes in length. So I just rely more. And then I often am, I started Outlaw Ocean reporting in 2014, so it's a decade now. And one of the many challenges of reporting in the space is you have very small embeds, not many berths. On a ship, you might get 3 unusual, usually 2 max. So that means it's you and one other person. You need your visual person, right? But you also need translators. As you saw, I'm just sitting there and Ed's doing all the translating, or Fabio. So I constantly was, up until Ben was the first staff videographer I had. Before that, I always used contract relationships with a set, 3 guys, essentially. And it wasn't guys decidedly, it was just those, all I met at the Times, Ed, Pierre Qatar, and Fabio. And Fabio I met on a ship, but I chose them because they were really easygoing, smart, savvy in the field, but they were multilingual. And so I could use them both as the visual all-purpose person, but also as a translator. I speak Spanish, but I don't speak Chinese, Arabic. You know, Pierre and Ed both have many languages, and that was essential. It's tough on them because I'm hiring them to do two people's jobs, two hard jobs, but at the same time, I get two berths. I got to be there, and I only got one other. So that's the other way in which I've really relied on videographers.
Well, I want to leave room for Q&A, even extra room, but I know you want to show another little video clip.
Yeah, I have one more clip here. So this is kind of the culmination of the behind-the-scenes piece. Our ultimate goal for our reporting at sea when we were covering China's distant water squid fleet was to get aboard vessels and to interview crew members firsthand and get their perspective. So this is a little glimpse into two successful boardings that we were able to do, one near the Galapagos Islands and the other near the Falkland Islands in the southern Atlantic.
Cool.
We're down.
Shoot in the rooms, get all the conditions, a lot of guys living there. Because I want to check into what it is later and whether it has something in it. You got this too? Have they had any issues with people chasing them?
我们船头前面不是有个大浮球吗？大浮球飘在上面，红色的这种颜色的。听见我们
在外面了。They sleep out here or outside. I don't know. 我们可以看一看吗？
可以。
你好。
如果说能乘坐你们船，回到大陆的话，如果说我们想回家，提供更多的信息，说中国的大使馆，阿根廷的中国的大使馆。
因为我们的证件很多都被扣押了，他不给我们。
有说这上面有很多信息。
可是我不知道怎么回去。
But he doesn't know how to go back.
他不让我下船。
But he would like
Otherwise, he
to.
would-
And what was he saying?
你在说什么？
对，就是说如果你们船到中国的是阿根廷的大使馆，我可以提供更多的信息，因为这上面有很多东西不方便透露，因为说毕竟在这条船上工作。对。
强留我们在那里，然后我们是走不了，他也不给我们船走。就算打个比方，我们不是违约嘛，然后我也说1分工钱我不要，他也不能让我们走，工钱我都不要，他都不能让我们走。
Essentially, they're trapped.
Ah, okay. Thank you. Will you take a picture of his phone number? He's gonna pull it up on his phone. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, guys. And if you ever have the chance, I mean, some of the other stuff they have out there, they follow like individuals who were taken and trying to get home or were hospitalized and were only taken off the ship because they had to be hospitalized. And a lot of the stuff about the squid business, which I had no idea about. It's really good. I want to open this up to questions, and we already have some back here. Please, I want to leave as much time for questions as possible. And let's hear it for the nice lady who's bringing everyone the microphone all day long.
So I'm really grateful that I stayed for this session. I'm inspired and also shook, you know. And so just real quickly, how do you prepare for a process knowing that you are going to encounter people and witness them being abused? Or how do you prepare for that knowing that you may not be able to be of immediate assistance? You know, just that whole range that comes with that. And then in the wide range of like offshoots of the project where people can go and get information, do we follow the money? Like, do we not just look at this ship owner here, but the pressures in the industry or the people consuming it, whatever, to give people that information? I know a lot of times in sort of observational investigative work, that piece gets left out, and it sounds like you all have other things. So those are my questions.
Really smart questions. The answer to the first question is an answer that evolves every day and sort of with each new project. The question being, you know, how do you prepare to try to do the best you should toward sources, fixers, and the subjects you're covering. We learned a lot out of a different story, which we did out of Libya, which had to do with abuse of migrants launching from Libya, trying to get to Europe, and a very, even more dangerous set of circumstances for everyone we worked with there. And that was a huge growth spurt for me personally, methodologically, and for the organization in terms of what kinds of things can we do as we lead into stories and come out of them. So, for example, we now have a side set of money that is just for kind of rapid response after stories or in the lead up to stories. In the case of Libya, for example, we had to get a bunch of migrants across the border out of the country the minute we got excavated from, or extracted, thank you, from Libya. So having the funds and having the freedom to move really quickly for whatever you feel is needed is a huge thing that we only developed in the last 2 years. Other standard, more traditional kind of protections, we have one of the reasons I left the Times is because I wanted to slow everything down. You know, like I had this dream state of what if you took money and time out of journalism? Just fantasize for a second. Like, what could you do? What would you dream to do if you had as much time, as much money as you wanted? And so that was sort of one of the animating first mental experiments I did. And so like, I will not push a story. And that's why I often go to venues very late and they hate me for it. Like I'll go and I'll say, it's done, I'm not tinkering with it, it's ready to go. And they're always like, could you just tell us like a year before? And I don't want to do that because the minute you bring editors in the room, with all due respect to editors who are in the room, like they're wanting to speed it up. So we slow everything down. And when it comes to sources, checking on where they are now, are they ready for us to go? Do we have funds? You know, have they thought through? Again, these are pretty standard. A lot of the sources we're dealing with, including one right now, we're not really sure they really know how dangerous it is that for them to be helping us. And so we have to kind of do that whole dance of telling them and kind of protecting their interests, but also wanting the story. Your second question, I was so long-winded on the first one that I forgot the second question. What was the second question?
Like, do we get to see the context and not...
Oh, follow the money. Yeah, another reason to slow it down. So the boring, unsexy stuff of this is the follow the money, and it's even more urgent and more difficult with this universe because the stuff that comes, you know, seafood as a product, whether it's apples or iPhones or garment, you know, like globalized products are tough to trace. It's really hard journalism. Seafood, crazy, because there's this huge black kind of section, invisible section of the supply chain because of all the handoffs at sea and what I said in the beginning about the multinational nature, the transient nature, et cetera. So it's a really hard supply chain to track, and you gotta track the supply chain if you really wanna just do something more than this is terrible story. Like this is terrible and you're connected to it story. That's what we try to do. And we also wanna avoid, and I think you were hinting at this in the framing of your question, like, we want to do systemic analysis, not character-driven analysis. So this bad captain, there are a lot of bad captains, bad people doing bad things in individual cases, but what is the metastructure that's like helping push them to do that? And that usually gets back to the kind of the economics of this whole product line. And that comes back to the consumers, you know, like, and so we spend a lot of time. Actually, we only have 9 on staff, and 5 of them are journalists in the set. The other folks are running music or MART or the books or whatever. And of those 5, 3 are investigators, and all they do is desktop, like supply chain, you know, stuff. And that's 3/4 of the reporting. That's the hard part. We get all the credit because we're out there doing the scary stuff, but those folks are the ones that actually connect it to Walmart or Whole Foods or whatever. That usually adds a year on to these things. But it's also what, in terms of impact, it's the game changer, because then you can actually nail the beneficiaries, which is all of us, but you can prove it.
Yeah. And just to add to that, with the China reporting, so they're Ian's brainchilds, but he's really good at coming up with tasks that seem impossible, and then you put a lot of dedicated people to it, and suddenly it comes out. And one of those things was, we call it the bait to plate tool. And this is published on our website, and you can look at individual retailers of seafood and trace it back to the original ship where it was caught. Obviously, it doesn't cover the entire industry, but it covers a big chunk of it. And that took an incredible amount of work from our investigators. And then the other side of it too, we as a team spent a lot of time looking at social media from workers and things like that. So we can see products being packaged at a factory, we can see the UPC number on it, and we can track that to a Walmart or a Whole Foods. And so we can confidently say, this factory processed seafood for this retailer. So we spent a lot of time looking at that.
I hear Pierre Qatar is here as well. You've mentioned him a couple
No,
of times.
he's not here, but I reported with him a lot. He's a long-time friend. Oh, is he here? Oh,
okay.
All right, I didn't know he was coming.
We have a question in the back.
Thank you so much for sharing this courageous project with us. And I mean, not to endanger you guys further, but South Korean journalist has another reason to track the Chinese vessels regarding the potential armed trades by the North Korea. So I was just wondering if you guys have any like lead or the kind of evidence gathering that you could do in terms of tracing the North Koreans, violating the sanction regimes on the high sea?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we talk more after, but yes is the simple answer. Some ideas, especially the sort of at sea using satellite tactics to trace where the vessels are moving from North Korea and going to. And we did a fair amount of North Korea specific work in this project. One component of it was looking at the factories when the seafood arrives to China. In the factories, is there forced labor there too? And what we found was significant numbers of Uyghur and significant numbers of North Korean workers in the factories that supply the world's seafood. That was brutally difficult to prove, except for the tactics Ben alluded to, which was many, many months of mining OSI, open source intelligence, which is Douyin, Chinese TikTok videos, thousands and thousands of hours of video, typically of average Joes saying, "Hi mom, I'm here at the plant, talk to you tonight," or whatever, but often innocuously loading it up to their Douyin account. But behind them is a box that says what have you. And
Long John Silver's.
And we also then know that that person is from this region, and we trace back. So we were able to prove the use of North Korean labor in significant numbers and the use of Uyghur labor in significant numbers for products coming to the US. And that's where a lot of the impact from that series came from, because those are very clear violations of US federal law, not to mention sanctions. So that same tactics of mining OSI, but also using satellite, could be used on arms trafficking out of North Korea.
Can we talk for just a minute about the danger that you guys are obviously in, both in terms of trying to board those ships? Some of the video shows what happens most of the time. Does not look like they want you anywhere near them. And then obviously you're filming off the coast of North Korea. So if you could talk about the danger and the choices you guys have to make.
Yeah, I mean, so it is dangerous, but not for the reasons you would think. If you're getting on a vessel, a Chinese vessel or any other vessel, you're not getting on there surreptitiously. And we also abide by the rules that are required at the times. So we don't ever say we're anything other than we are, that we're journalists. But even if we did, there's no way you're getting on that vessel. You saw how dangerous it is. The real danger, so it's not, the danger isn't that they're going to do you harm. Because once you've talked your way onto the vessel, you're the guest of the captain's God, no one's messing with you. They might kick you off, like happened 20 minutes after those guys, whispered that stuff to us. Some minder saw that they were talking and said, okay, time to go. But no one's going to do you harm, most likely. The danger in this reporting is the conditions. This is an industrial Dickensian factory that has an ice skate rink, slippery floor. Imagine an elevator that's going up 5 floors at all times and a sort of fun house floor that's doing this. That's a ship, right? And so slippery, up and down, nonstop, huge machinery swinging around, sharp, there are rods that they use to electrocute huge fish that are out of control. Sometimes those are uncovered. There's just a lot of danger, not to mention dirty, really dirty. So if you're doing an embed of multiple weeks, like the North Korean reporting, we were embedding on a South Korean squid vessel where we'd bought our way on. We were not on a Sea Shepherd vessel. So we were sleeping on the deck for weeks on end. You get an infection, you're not going back to shore. So these are the dangers: food poisoning, getting hit by something, falling overboard, no one notices because it's the middle of the night and no one's watching you, etc. Those are the real dangers. Did I miss any?
I think you covered most of them.
Ben's like, no, that's the fun part. There you go. Other questions? Grab another question. Yes, please.
So you talked a lot about the complexities of, first of all, outstanding work, and I'm just deeply grateful for your doing this and impressed by it. You talked about the complexities of establishing supply for seafood broadly and squid, and I'm wondering if you've worked at all with demand, or maybe worked with animal rights groups who might be willing to partner up with you to help spread this word, because I know that generally speaking they're also attentive to the conditions of workers, or in the cases of factory farms, nearby residents, and maybe that would be another venue for getting the message out.
Yeah, I mean, so in that, if you imagine the electrified fence, the different metaphors in journalism, church state, or, journalists and advocates, but there's an electrified fence between you. You get too close, you're going to get zapped and not be able to be a journalist anymore. We get really close. So when I was at the Times, when we would have a big story or something, there'd invariably be a hearing or some such, and they'd be like, hey, can you come testify? And the Times would say, and I say, why? No, you're not going, because it's a dog and pony show and you can get cornered, and Fox News is framing you as some, So they're like, no, we're not putting you in that dangerous sort of back alley that is the Hill. I now run my own shop, right? So, and I know how close I can get to that electrified fence where I'm still comfortable about, am I crossing the line between journalist and advocate? So for me, on that very issue, the line I set for me and my staff is, I do testify and all those things, but I only do it just so if anyone gets hurt reputationally, it's going to be me. But secondly, when it comes to our proximity to advocates, we say, look, we will use you for taxi services. Sea Shepherd, Greenpeace, all these folks. We will not be showing you anything. We will not be telling you anything, and you will not be laying a list of rules on us. If that's not okay with you, fine, but we can't come. We now have a long relationship, and so they know the rules. And then with the next phase in which we're getting close to that fence with advocates is on distribution. And the rule I said is, we love you. We'd love if you promoted our stuff. You can't touch it. Don't edit it. Don't crop it. Don't do anything. We're not going to tell you what we're up to before it's game time, or maybe a week before. But we would love if you advocate for your cause by amplifying our journalism. We will give it to you in any form you need, and then you do what you want with it. But we're not going to have you into our house. We're going to bring you our stuff, and if you could get it out more, fantastic. And whether that's the right call or not, I don't know. Maybe that's too close for some editors, but that's what we do. And we have we're always looking for amplifiers. We have a whole person on staff who just handles our database of amplifiers, and they're in a different category in the database than journalists, editors. And so the amplifiers get alerted X days before launch. This is coming. What do you need from us? Would you be willing to help promote it on your channels? And it's very self-promotional and, would have been frowned upon at the Times. I got a business, an NGO to run, and so I need to make sure it gets out there.
Yeah, just to add to that, the way the model kind of works is that we're providing an unbiased reporting that is used as a tool for advocates, policymakers, and academics. And they're the ones who push the agenda, but without the information that we're providing them, they can't make those educated decisions, basically.
And I would throw in one more thing. Like, we often get asked, like, oh, you doom and gloom and problems and demoralizing and morale killers, and all guilty as charged. Like, I'm an investigative journalist. That's what I do. I look for problems. I try to highlight them in a fair, rigorous way with a lot of different angles on it. But in the last 2 years, I realized, well, maybe I should try harder. And so we started having, for every project, a solutions tab, which made me really nervous because it felt like I was getting too close to that fence. So we have this big banner at the top, which essentially says, this is not our opinion. We are not weighing in on this piece of legislation or that particular brand of solution. This is us reporting a bunch of different folks and what they say, many of whom disagree with each other, some of whom we despise and don't agree with. It doesn't much matter. We're just going to go survey industry, academics, advocates, what have you, and try to write up of all the stuff we just highlighted. Here's what the stakeholders, let's not call them experts, say, and chronicle them. Here are their proposed solutions. So we try to, from a reporting perspective, do put some of that, give voice to advocates and solutions journalism, but that's as far as I can muster, just in terms of energy.
Well, I wish we had more time, but we don't. But I want to say, first of all this stuff sounds cool. The animation project, I'm going to make a pitch for Diana. I'm sure she'd like to see it for a future festival screening. And I just want to take this time to thank Ian and Ben for being here and joining us and for bringing us this incredible work. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Really.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Sig. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. You guys are great. Really, really cool shit.